Hello, and why should anyone care about robotics? My name is Keay, and I'm the Research Director for Cyber-Physical Systems with CSIRO's Data 61. CSIRO is Australia's national science agency, and I'll be giving a perspective as a good citizen of robotics research into why I think we should be worried about this question and how we can go about making sure that people do care about robotics, and in particular about robotics research. So first, I guess I'd like to ask the question of who is the robotics community? This is an image from last year's Robotics Science and Systems Conference, and I think in many people's minds, this is probably what they think the robotics community looks like. But this is really just a subset of the robotics community, and it's the robotics research community. I think we need to be doing a much better job of engaging with the broader robotics community if we want to achieve many of the aims in robotics research. Now, I didn't really think too much about who was part of the robotics community until, as part of the Australian Centre for Robotic Vision, I started the process of putting together Australia's first robotics roadmap, which was released in mid-2018. On advice from Professor Henrik Christensen, the architect of all three of the US's robotics roadmaps, I mapped out a series of workshops focused on different segments of the Australian economy where we thought robots could have an impact. And then I had to think about who I would invite to those workshops. It was then that I realised that as a research community, we had quite limited connections. Sure, we knew a few of the persistent local robotics companies in our area, but I really struggled to compile a big list. So then I undertook a rough capability mapping exercise to try and identify the companies in Australia that were involved in the creation or application of robotics and/or robotics-related technology. And when I say robotics-related, I'm talking about things like computer vision, development of sensors and sensing systems. What I found was that, and we think these figures are quite conservative, that Australia, with our population of 24 million people, has more than 1,000 companies that are involved in robotics in some way, shape or form, and that those companies employ more than 50,000 people and are probably worth in excess of $12 billion to the revenue of Australia. Now, why is that important to know? Well, apart from trying to get all of these companies involved in the production of the roadmap, having a good understanding of Australia's robotics capability is really essential when talking to the government to convince them of the importance of different sectors of the economy, in particular robotics. And until we undertook this exercise, it was impossible to describe Australia's robotics industry except via anecdotes. And unfortunately, government policy decisions are not usually based on anecdotes. They require a strong link back to the importance of the sector to the economy, as is probably true in all parts of the world. And because robotics services all other sectors of the economy, it is really hard to get good numbers on the economic impact and job creation benefits of robotics and related technologies, simply because the data is not collected by our Australian Bureau of Statistics. I think this is true also in many other parts of the world. So that still raises the question of who is the robotics community? And I guess what we found when we asked people about their reasons for wanting to be involved in the roadmap, we came up with a number of different categories, as you can see here. We found companies that primarily create robotics and robotics-related technologies, integrators who help companies adopt robotics-related technologies, adopters who want their companies to take on robotics-related technologies, of course, academics and researchers, education providers, teachers, students, government policymakers are invested in this area, and enthusiasts, and there are a large number of those. And we even had to supply another category, other, because people didn't necessarily feel that they fitted in any of the other 7 categories particularly well. But I guess at the end of the day, what it means is the robotics community is quite varied and consists of a range of different stakeholders who, as a robotics research community, we need to consider when we're engaging with the people around us. And why are these different stakeholder groups interested in robotics research? Well, there are a range of different reasons, but for many of the companies, they're interested in collaboration and gaining a competitive advantage. And for many others, it's really about preparing for the future. And in some cases, it's just pure curiosity. Importantly, what's in it for the robotics research community by engaging with all of these different stakeholders? Well, I put it to you that it could be worth $100 million worth of research funding. At least that's what they found by the time it came around to the 2nd edition of the US Robotics Roadmap. And certainly it was in the back of my mind when we were doing Australia's first robotics roadmap that that would be an excellent outcome to be able to aim for. But there are other reasons for keeping these stakeholders invested in the future of robotics research. And this includes the ability of getting many of these companies involved in the real world testing of concepts and prototypes, and as a path to market. In Australia, we really are a nation of small to medium-sized businesses, and we are, in my current role, increasingly finding that many of these small to medium-sized robotics companies are a fantastic path to market for much of the research work that we're trying to take through to commercialization. So this is a great benefit of unearthing much of this capability and finding out more about the synergies between the capability and the research work that we're trying to do. The other benefits of engaging with these stakeholders are, purely awareness and profile raising for robotics as a whole, and general acceptance of the technologies that we are developing. So I think it is definitely an area that is worth pursuing. So in putting all of that together, where is the cash? We decided to launch the roadmap in Australia's national capital, Canberra, at Parliament House, and we're able to get Australia's chief scientist, many politicians along, representatives from the Army, the Navy and the Air Force, as well as representatives from many robotics companies, just interested members of the general public and robotics researchers, of course. Unfortunately, we didn't get $100 million, but we did raise the profile of robotics and started to get people talking about the need to create a recognised robotics industry in Australia, rather than just being consumers of robotics. And that's very important for Australian robotics researchers. If we want the talent and technologies that we develop here in Australia to remain here in Australia and have plenty of opportunities, then it really is important for us to be able to have a well-recognised robotics industry that is supported not only by the government and by the industry itself, but by the community. Now, one of the other benefits of engaging with these stakeholders is in making new friends. One of the, and also it's about finding out cool stuff. So I was doing a school visit to award some prizes in drone design and was paired with someone called Sean Tansley from the Queensland Police Service. He's the gentleman sitting at the back of the robot in the picture there. Sean is a senior technical surveillance officer. And while I rocked up with a pretty impressive looking drone, Sean rocked up with a whole command station, in the back of which was one of these robots that he's currently sitting on, the Ozbot ATR, or all-terrain robot. Sean and his colleagues are part of the Police Service's Tactical Response Group, and they found that they were unable to find a robot that suited them when it came to handling sieges. And so they started their own robotics company to solve that problem. They now supply all the police services in Australia and some overseas, And the robot itself is based on largely commodity products that you can readily buy at a garage, hardware store, and sports shop in case it needs to be repaired well away from home base. So I made a case study of the robot in the robotics roadmap, and the connection with Sean and his company BIA5 has since led to a range of benefits. So CSIRO's Data 61 is one of the teams competing in the DARPA Subterranean Challenge. We were experimenting with a number of different ground robots, but I was able to introduce the team to Sean, and they thought to give the Ozbot ATR a go in the competition, where it really has been a standout performer. There have been a number of other benefits. We have added the smarts to the Ozbot all-terrain robot by adding our perception backpack, which allows the robot to navigate and communicate with the other robots on the course. This is a video of the Ozbot in action, taking one of our drones, which is also from a local company called Emerson, onto the course, where the drone is launched autonomously from the back of Ozbot, and which then continues to explore the environment. Sean's company BIA5 have been able to showcase Ozbot on the world stage, selling one to NASA's JPL so far. And we're now working with BIA5 as an early adopter of our Wildcat navigation system applied to emergency response, which is a great path to commercialization for some of our more mature research. So it has really led to a fantastic collaboration and commercialization opportunity for both of us. So in terms of how I think the robotics research community should be engaging with this range of different stakeholders, well, the roadmap was actually a good push for us, for some of us to be doing that. Just the process of having workshops with different industry sectors has proven to be extremely useful and built up long-lasting connections. The government briefings, which, while painful and not resulting in $100 million worth of research funding investment yet, I still think have been very useful in terms of raising the profile of the robotics community. And I encourage everyone who's part of the robotics research community to engage with their local communities by volunteering to speak at meetup groups and make serendipitous connections, I guess like the one I made on that school visit. I think we also need to get better at describing the why of the research that we do. Sometimes when I ask one of my researchers why they've spent time developing a new robot system, I get really frustrated when the answer that I get is because it's cool. Unfortunately, I think that doesn't cut it for most people outside the research community. So I encourage everyone to go out and engage armed with a clear why that describes the importance of what we're all doing. Another side product of the whole roadmap process was the creation of Robotics Australia Network. We've never really had a cohesive voice for robotics in Australia, and so this has led to us creating a network focused on the robotics industry, but that is also welcoming of other parts of the robotics ecosystem, from researchers through to students and enthusiasts. I hope that this will be representative of the whole robotics community and not just subsets of it. And I think there has never been a better time to build support and community in robotics. PwC did a global survey that showed that 58% of global consumers think robotics will have a positive impact on society. We really need to harness that support. We need to deserve that support, or else we need to go back to square one and ask, why should anyone care about robotics? And what will it mean when people do care about robotics? And where should we hope that our community building efforts lead? Well, obviously, it would be nice to have investment of $100 million into robotics, but I actually think our ambition should be larger. Certainly for Australia, I'm hoping that we can build up support for the robotics community to the point where we were able to get some Australian robotics technology onto some of our currency, just like the Canadians have. Because what says that a nation loves robotics more than putting it on a piece of currency that people see every day? And before I start up any national rivalries, I'd like to acknowledge that Canada, you are awesome, and we should all aspire to have support for robotics like you do, but you will never get as many gold medals at the Olympics as Australia. Well, thank you. I think our responsibility as good citizens of robotics research is to engage with the broader robotics community and get much better at communicating the why of what we are doing in research and how that benefits the whole community. Thank you.